whether they are mature followers of Jesus who have walked with him for decades, or whether they're folks that are maybe skeptical about faith, or even angry and turned off and have rejected the idea that there's even a God to begin with. Every one of us at some point, and maybe frequently in our lives, sort of looks to the sky and wonders why, what's going on. And it's not just each of us who've done that, but we're learning in this series that even Jesus himself wrestled with some of those questions. This series where we're learning that Jesus gets it. He knows how it feels to be in some of those places. And I'm so glad you're here with us today to be part of this conversation. I'm Wolfgang, I'm part of the team, and I want to welcome you to North Shore. If maybe you've been here many times before, this is your very first time joining us online, whatever it may be, we are so glad to have you with us for this important conversation. And if you've been around North Shore much at all, you know we try to talk about real stuff here. And these questions about pain and struggle in life are as real as it gets. And so as we're preparing for Easter, which is coming up in like just basically a month, which is crazy, we're looking at the darkest moments in Jesus' life, the darkest moment, the 6 hours that he spent on the cross. And we're specifically looking at the things that he said during those times. There are 7 of them that are recorded for us in the New Testament, in the Gospels, those accounts of Jesus' life, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And each one of them has significance and meaning. They teach us something about the heart of God, who Jesus is, and how he relates to us. And they speak to some of the deepest needs, some of the deepest struggles that any of us ever wrestle with. And beautifully, they remind us that if you've ever come up against things that seem too hard or questions that seem too big, you are not alone. You need to know Jesus gets it. So today we're looking at the second of these 7 statements. It's a statement that is only recorded in the New Testament book of John. So if you have a Bible, I'd love for you to turn there. It's John chapter 19, verses 25 to 27. If you don't have a Bible, you may have a Bible app on your phone. You may want to pull up to take a look at this passage, or of course, in just a moment, we'll put it up on the screen so you can follow along. But just to give you the setting for what's happening, Jesus is now hanging on the cross here in John 19. And we don't know how far into the 6 hours that he said this, but the Apostle John, who is an eyewitness to this, records this, and this is what he says. John chapter 19, starting in verse 25. It says, near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, of course, named Mary, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. You'll learn quickly, Mary is a popular name in New Testament times, all right? Verse 26, when Jesus saw his mother Mary there, and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby. Incidentally, that's John talking about himself, this eyewitness who wrote this account of Jesus' life. He describes himself that way, the apostle that Jesus loved throughout this letter. There's no snarkiness really in it at all, except he's just kind of pointing out that they did have this beautiful connection and relationship. Well, here's what he says. When Jesus saw his mother there and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to her, woman, here's your son. And to the disciple, here's your mother. And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home. Now, I will be honest, I've advanced degrees in this stuff. I've studied scripture for years and years and years. I'll be honest, this is one of those verses that I don't think I've ever really spent a lot of time on. I don't think I've ever taught about it. I don't think I've ever actually dug deep into studying it because I've just always sort of cruised past this part. I mean, let's be honest. Some of the other big things that Jesus says on the cross seem so much weightier, right? Like what Scotty talked about last week. My God, why have you forsaken me? This profound mystery of crying out to God and feeling like he's not listening. Or later in this series when we talk about, Father, forgive them for they don't know what they do. I mean, these are profound, like rocking kind of like statements that make us think and challenge us. Then we look at this one and we think, wait a second, this sounds like some sort of setting up details or making arrangements for some family business. But the more I've dug into this passage, the more I've read and prayed and thought about it, the more I've discovered the deep, deep significance, the beautiful truth woven into this scene that I think it impacts every single one of us every day of our lives. And I don't think that's an accident. I don't think any of this is accidental. Jesus is being intentional about the words and actions he's doing during this time. Something he wants us to know as he gives us a pretty amazing glimpse into the heart of who God is. And in order for us to catch it, I just want to talk briefly about exactly what is happening in this moment. As I said, this is the darkest moment of Jesus' life. The cost that Jesus is paying in this particular moment is the highest cost any human being has ever paid or will ever pay. He's paying the price. He's absorbing the sin debt of everyone who ever lived. The theological word for this is the atonement. This is him stepping in to pay the ransom or to pay the penalty for everything that I have ever done wrong, everything that anyone has ever done wrong. And you know, if you've seen the movies or read any of this from Scripture, or heard the story before, you know it is a brutal physical cost that Jesus pays. I mean, we read about the beatings that he endured and the mistreatment that he suffered and the point of reaching such exhaustion, such dehydration, such severe blood loss. He's not even strong enough to carry his cross from there where he's been sentenced to death up to the hill where he'll be crucified. They force somebody from the crowd to step in and help him carry it. He's just too weak to do it. And this is all before he even gets to the top of that hill, where once he gets there, Roman executioners lay him down on a big wooden plank and drive long metal spikes through his wrists and his feet. I know it's graphic, I don't mean to be graphic, but this is the physical cost that Jesus is paying in this moment. But it's not just a physical cost, he's paying a mental cost. All of his friends have at this point betrayed and abandoned him. The people who he's come to save are mocking him, humiliating him, spitting in his face. We know historically that when people were crucified, they were crucified naked. All just part of the exposing and humiliation of a person. It wasn't like you see in the movies or TV or art or any of that where you see this little loincloth. That is not accurate. Jesus was fully exposed, all adding to the shame, the embarrassment, the humiliation of this moment. See, we sometimes forget, yes, he's 100% God, but he is 100% human as well. And he's going through intense physical anguish and mental anguish. But as Scotty talked about last week, worst of all, he's paying an unimaginable price spiritually. It's this brutal moment when for the first time he feels isolated from God. When he's absorbing the sin of humanity and paying the price and the penalty for that sin. It's a mysterious moment. Theologians wrestle with exactly what it means, but it's something he had never experienced before. And the Apostle Paul explains it this way in 2 Corinthians 5. He says, God made him, that is Jesus, God made Jesus who had no sin to be sin for us, so that in him we might become the righteousness of God. This Jesus who had never sinned, he'd never known that sensation of regret or shame, never known the sting or pain of being separated from God. In that moment, all of the sin of humanity falls on his shoulders. He becomes sin, to be sin on our behalf, to open the door for a whole new way of life. In this life and in the life to come. And that's the beautiful good news. It's the core of what we're about, what we believe, what's changing our lives. That's why the night before Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, on his knees, begging God, please, Lord, I know what's coming. Please, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. His prayer's so intense, Scripture tells us, that blood began to form in his sweat. Digging so deep, please, God, if there's any way, any other way, please, Lord. So you think about this. Jesus is enduring all this horrific stuff there on the cross, paying the highest price any human being will ever pay, performing the most important, significant act in human history when he stops and he make sure that a desperate widow had somebody to give her a place to stay and to make sure that she was going to have something to eat. It seems almost unbelievable in the midst of that much intensity. And of course, it's not that unusual for Jesus to do something like this. We see throughout his ministry, his care for others, his compassion, his healing, his love, these wonderful gestures, looking out for people that others ignored. But it's this moment, it's in the middle of his own pain and suffering that he sees this need in the life of his mother, Mary. Here's the point that I want you to grasp today. Here, even in the middle of his pain, here's the deal. Jesus saw the pain of others. And maybe that seems obvious to you, but Jesus, he just saw the pain of others. Let me compare how he responds to how I might respond. Do you remember the last time you were sick? Like really sick? Maybe you broke a bone or you were hurt in some way and you're recovering from surgery. You ever had that experience? Can I admit, when I don't feel well like that, I turn into a grumpy 2-year-old, basically. I know some of you as spouses maybe are nudging your husband, maybe they have this same pattern in their life, but I suddenly turn into this pathetic thing curled up in a blanket on a couch. You know what I'm talking about? Where I want my certain kind of drink, I want my certain kind of soup, I want what I want on the TV, I want to be comfortable. Forget getting up and helping anybody else at that moment. I'm not going to do chores or, no, I'm too sick, Am I the only one that does this? I'm the only one. All right, well, just use me as an example of what not to do then, all right? When I don't feel well, bottom line, my focus is where? It's all about me. Me, myself, and I. Well, here's Jesus. And he's in the middle of this unimaginable pain. And his focus isn't on himself. Text says he sees. He sees his mother's pain. And you think about all that Mary's been through, for all the blessings that God poured into her life. It's been a hard journey. All the way back to when she finds out she's supernaturally pregnant, and whispers and gossip, scandal creep through her small village, beginning to wonder if she's quite the young lady they thought she was. Or after Jesus is born, this threat of King Herod, who wants to kill her newborn boy. And so the family is forced to flee hundreds and hundreds of miles south into Egypt as refugees to escape this persecution and oppression. Somewhere along the line, she'd lost her husband, Joseph. Most scholars believe that Joseph was dead and gone for some time before Jesus was crucified at the end of his earthly ministry. So for some period of that time, she was a single mother, a widow in a culture that had very little regard for women in that way. Right after Jesus was born, there was a prophet who ran into her in the temple courtyard. And he had promised her that Mary, a sword will pierce your soul, he said to her. And it was true. And now here she is at the foot of the cross. Can you imagine her pain? This young man that she had carried in her womb for 9 months. This one that when he was a little boy, if he fell and scraped his knee, she was there to comfort him, to be there for him, to love him. Now, here's Mary looking up at her helpless, naked son on a cross, and there's nothing she can do about it. Now, I've been in ministry now for about 30 years, a little under that. And can I tell you, I've walked with lots of different people through lots of different pain, but there's something unique about the pain of a parent grieving the loss of their child. And so many times I can think of examples where it was just a young child that passed away for any number of reasons. But even for folks whose children have grown older, where the parent outlived their child, even that, there's something about that kind of grief. And here's Mary experiencing that. And yet, despite his own pain, Jesus sees her pain. Jesus cares for her needs. And as I was reading this, I was thinking, now why would he do this on the cross? I mean, of all the other things that he says on the cross, all of them are tied kind of to the moment and what's happening. But this is one of those moments, why didn't he just take care of this at the Last Supper, the night before? Why didn't he just lean over to John then and he said, something brutal's about to happen, John. You'll understand tomorrow, but if anything happens, I want you to take care of my mom. Can I count on you for that? John might have been confused, but surely he would have agreed. Or a few days later, after Easter, when Jesus had been resurrected, he very easily could have said, I'm only gonna be here for a short time, for 40 days. After that though, John, I need you to take care of my mom. Can I count on you? That would have actually made some sense, right? But Jesus actually says this while hanging on the cross. Why? See, I think there's significance behind that. I think Jesus is saying, yes, on the cross, I came to give you eternal life. Yes, on the cross, I came for your salvation. But I need you to know that on the cross, I still care about your personal needs. I care about what's happening in your life, your day-to-day needs. And it wasn't just true for Mary. I believe he says the same to each of us. I see you. You might be going through a really hard situation right now, but I want you to know, I see you. Yes, of course, I care about your soul, but I also care about your medical report. And I care about what major you're gonna choose. And I care about your financial struggle or the challenge you're experiencing in your relationships. I care about your child who's walked away from me. I care about everything that you might be going through. See, friends, he sees you. He cares for your needs. And I thought so much about this because over the last couple of weeks, we've been, as a staff and as prayer teams, we've been reading and praying through the different requests that many folks left in our prayer room a few weeks ago. Those of you that were part of that, you know there was a little station there where we were encouraged to pray this simple, give us our daily bread prayer, and to write needs or circumstances that we were asking God to intervene and step in, and to invite others to pray as well. And we've been reading through those, all of those being prayed for again and again and again. And some of them, of course, were the sorts of things you might expect, people going through just really difficult medical circumstances, or so many people crying out, asking for God to bring healing to a child, dealing with mental health or issues in their spiritual life, those kinds of things. But you know, there were other ones as we read through them that maybe on the face didn't seem quite like those. For instance, someone literally was praying that God would bring them a plumber that would help them with some work that they needed done at their house. There was another one that appeared to be written in the handwriting of a child who was praying for their pet. And can I tell you, I love that. Because you know what that says? That says, it reminds us, God doesn't just care about the big monster stuff in our lives. He cares about those simple little things that may not seem that big compared to other people's needs, but are still things we're thinking about, still things we care about or feel anxious about, big and small. Jesus sees those needs. He cares about those needs. That's why Peter wrote to the early Christians in 1 Peter 5:7. He said, cast all your anxiety on him. Why? Because he cares for you. Not just the big stuff, all of it. Cast it on him. And that word anxiety could also be translated cares. All those things you care about, you can trust him with those. He cares for you. He sees. He loves you so much that all of those things matter to him. See, it was when Jesus is facing the darkest pain of his entire life that it says he sees his mother. And I want you to know today, I think maybe some of you are here just for this moment. I want you to know today, Jesus sees you too. He sees you in this room or wherever it is you're watching from. He knows the things that you're worried about. Whether you feel like your needs are big or small, he sees your pain. He sees your suffering. He sees those tears at night. He sees those things that you haven't told anybody else that you're dealing with. He sees everything. He says, hey, I just need you to know today, I see you. I care about your needs. Some of you, the whole reason you're here today is because you just need reminded of that. That he sees you, he cares about you, he loves you. But he does even more than just sees Mary, he speaks into the pain that Mary is experiencing. He steps into it, speaks into it. He doesn't just feel bad for her, he does something about it. Even in the midst of his own weakness and suffering, he meets her need in that moment, not by taking away her pain, but by making sure that she has what she needs in the midst of that pain, that she has someone who will care for her, someone who will be with her, someone who will grieve alongside her. It's there at the cross that Jesus forms this new little family, this new kind of relationship between otherwise disconnected people to come together in a new way to care for each other. You know, the New Testament tells us Jesus, he had other siblings. Mark 6 tells us that he had at least 6. He had 4 brothers and 2 sisters. They would have been half siblings of Jesus through Mary and Joseph, of course. And we know from the Gospels that they initially rejected Jesus. They thought he'd lost his mind. And it wasn't until after his resurrection that they actually came to believe in him too. In fact, one of his brothers, James, became the leader of the early church there in Jerusalem and wrote the book James that we now have in Scripture preserved for us today. But when Jesus was hanging on the cross, they wanted nothing to do with him. And so it's no surprise they weren't there for him. But what they wound up doing is they weren't even there to support their poor widowed mother, right? They just left her hanging. They seemed to have abandoned her. And maybe you know what that's like, for your family to let you down. Maybe you know how it feels to be rejected or betrayed or treated unfairly by the very people who are supposed to love you most. To feel abandoned when you needed them. For your family to be broken. And I want you to know, again, we see here, when relationships are broken, friends, Jesus gets it. He's been there. He's experienced that. And there at the cross, Jesus forms a new family. He knows we need each other, even if our families aren't what they ought to be. He forms a new family. Woman, behold your son. Son, behold your mother. I know you need someone to care for you and meet your needs. These circumstances may not change, but you do not have to go through them alone. And so I'm forming a new family, a new community, because every single one of us need people like that. We need people, especially in the middle of those really dark times of life, because there's nothing like knowing that someone's there with you, even if there's nothing to say, even if they can't do anything to make it better, just to have them with you. It's so powerful, isn't it? To know you're not alone. See, that's God's heart for us. It's why he places us in relationship with each other. This tender heart of God, who the psalmist describes this way in Psalm 68, a father to the fatherless, a defender of widows, is God in his holy dwelling. God sets the lonely in families. He leads out the prisoners with singing, but the rebellious live in a sun-scorched land. See, he knows our needs aren't just about our souls and our eternities, although he's obviously willing to go to great lengths to meet those needs. I mean, here he is on a cross for us. But he knows how deeply we need other people. And friends, that's why we are always trying as a church family to live out this call to be God's family to each other. That's why we talk so much about community and getting connected around here. Whether it's through experiences like Samantha mentioned earlier with Starting Point, where it's just a chance to meet people and to start to discover some folks you may be able to walk through life with. That's why we have dozens of life groups that meet all around the area and all different nights of the week. These are little families of people who are learning to follow Jesus together, who are learning to be there for each other when all of us need it. That's why we have other kinds of groups that are designed for folks facing unique challenges in life. Our care ministry, for instance, offers support groups and one-to-one care for those who are grieving or who are struggling in some way. In fact, tomorrow night, some of you may know, our new divorce care series starts up on Monday night, tomorrow at 6:30. And you can find out more about that on our website for folks that are maybe facing or struggling with some of the pain related to that challenge in life. After Easter, we'll be launching additional groups to just help connect you with others who can walk together through the great challenges we all face. Of course, you can learn more about all those on the care section of our website. I wonder for you, here's the bottom line, what would it look like for you to take a step toward that kind of community? To be part of the family, to experience that care from others and also extend that care for others. Because at the cross, Jesus formed a new family and invites all of us to be part of it. Because Jesus gets it. He knows we need other people. He needed other people. And he invites us to come together to help each other. Look at how Paul summarizes this in Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. He says, carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Carry each other's burdens. We don't go through this alone, we do it together. And I'll admit, we don't always do this perfectly as a church. As I say frequently, if you're looking for the perfect church, keep looking, all right? We're not it, but we're learning and we're trying. We are imperfect people, but we're trying to be part of this beautiful new family and community that God is establishing. And it's not just about coming and saying, when are other people going to meet my needs? That's not how family works. It's not just, woman, behold your son. It's also son, behold your mother. It goes both ways. Where we learn that not only do I receive, but I'm part of this family. What do I have to give? How can I share? It's not just expecting others to meet your needs. It's asking, what are you doing, even in your challenge, to help meet the needs of others? What would that look like for you? And of course, all of this new family is formed right there at the foot of the cross. I mean, you think about this. John almost missed it. Remember, he and the disciples, they had abandoned Jesus. They'd fled for their lives when he was arrested. They'd left him all alone during his beatings and trial. But even though John had abandoned his teacher and friend, we see in this beautiful scene, John has made his way back to the cross. He returned to the cross. The text suggests that he was a little further back maybe than Mary and the other women. It's a little more of a distance. Maybe he was embarrassed that he had failed. Maybe he knew that he hadn't stepped up for his friend and teacher at that critical moment, and that he had let him down. We don't know what was going through his mind, except he realized that he could come back to the cross and experience a new start, a new beginning. Because it was there on the cross that Jesus saw him as well. It's there on the cross that Jesus forgave him as well and said, I want to use you. I want to speak to you. I want to include you as part of my new family. You see, friends, the cross is where we get to start over. It was at the cross where Jesus changed John's life forever. And all it took was for John to come back to the cross. And I want you to hear me today. You can come back to the cross. I don't know what your life has looked like. I don't know what's you've been holding on to. I mean, you might feel like you're a million miles away from God. You might think to yourself, I'm so far away. Can I just tell you, you are only just a few steps from drawing back to the cross. It's as simple as that, to turn and look to him. Whatever you've been carrying, you feel like you've been holding guilt, you've been holding shame, you've been holding on to unforgiveness, you can come back to the cross. Have you been saying, I don't know what my life looks like. I don't know what my purpose is. I feel so aimless. Come back to the cross. When John was far away, when John had fled, when John had abandoned Jesus, it was there Jesus said, I give you forgiveness. I give you purpose. I give you responsibility. I give you a fresh start, new life after my death. There's power in the cross. So we're going to spend a little bit of time remembering that as we're doing every week in this series. We want to give you a chance to come back to the cross. We're going to come together around this beautiful family table and eat this little meal that Jesus invited us to eat as part of his family. There in your seats, in the back of the seats in front of you or here on the front row, just at the bottom there, you'll find these little cups that contain bread and juice. These are simple little symbols that they embody the price that Jesus paid out of love for each of us, what he did on a cross. So grab those right now. If you don't have one of those, just let someone know or find one in the seat near you. These beautiful little symbols, they not only remind us of the price that was paid for us, they remind us that he sees us. Each of us matter, our needs, our pain. And at the cross, we get to become part of a whole new family. Brothers and sisters who lean on each other, who pray for each other, who carry one another's burdens. And so here's what I want to ask you to do. One side of the container has a little piece of bread, the other has juice. Just open that bread side right now. The one I have, there's no print on that side if you're having trouble figuring out. Take that little small piece of bread and hold it there. And let me remind you, here's what happened. Jesus, on the night he was betrayed, he took the bread, eating there with his disciples, and he broke it. And he said, "This is my body, broken for you. When you eat it, do it in remembrance of me." And so, friends, together as one family, let's eat this bread together. Then it says, in the same way, Jesus took the cup and he held it up in front of his friends and said, "This is my blood, which will be poured out for you. Every time you drink this, I want you to remember me." And so again, friends, brothers and sisters, as a family, let's drink this cup together. Can I just say, I love being in this family with you. We're a family together, friends. Part of how we care for one another is simply by praying for each other. And so I want to invite those of you who are part of our prayer team, if you guys would quickly kind of make your way down here and kind of get into position if you're helping with prayer, just come on down so folks can see you. Part of the ways we serve each other as brothers and sisters is we just pray for one another. And so in a moment, when we stand, I'm going to invite you to come on down and let one of these folks pray over some care or need that you have right now in your life. Because Jesus sees you and he invites us to cast all our cares on him. So I'm gonna invite you, would you stand with me right now? Everyone else, if you're able, would you stand and just pray with me before we sing this last song together. God, I thank you. I am so grateful, Lord, that you see us. Big or small, you care about each of the needs in our lives. And so as you invite us to do, we come to you with those and we cast them on you. We surrender them to you. We ask that you'll give us your peace. And God, we also acknowledge that you put us in a family where others can stand with us and remind us that we're not alone. And maybe there are some who are here today who desperately need reminded of that. You need to come and just let someone pray with you and remind you that there are people that care about you, God cares about you, that we can come to him with our every need. But for all of us, the simple invitation is this, is to come back to the cross. Come back to the cross, be part of the family. Experience the grace in and through us that only Jesus gives. We thank you for that grace and we surrender ourselves all over again to you in the name of Christ.